me ask you a question today. This whole series, just really quick, just being real, that's just as simple as the definition of this series as it possibly can be, and that's really what we've tried to do through this whole thing, is just be real. Real with the topics that we're discussing, real about life that we're living, and today is definitely not going to be any different. Just being real about this particular subject and situation. So I'll ask you a real question. Have you ever thought, if I just had more, I'd be happier? If I just had more, life would be easier. It would be better. If I just had more. You say, well, Pastor Ron, what are you talking about more? Well, you define that. Now, the obvious answer, and probably one that most people would say, if I just had more money. Now, this is not a message about money. I just want to throw that out there really quickly. It's not a message on necessarily giving or anything of the sort, but it's going to be a part of it because it has to be an obvious part of it, just being real, because honestly, we've probably all said that. If I just had more, if I just had more of a house, life would be less stressful. More bedrooms, more bathrooms. Don't tell me nothing about that. When we came home from Lebanon, we left a brand new 3,000 square foot, 2-story, 4-bedroom, 3-bath home. And we moved back to a 620 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath duplex. Because at the moment, that's really all that was available to us. That was me, my wife, and my 6 kids. That's basically 100 square foot per person in what felt like a 20 square foot bathroom. More would definitely have been better. It is better. However, if you were to go ask some of my children, some of them to this day would still say that was the greatest place we ever lived. We poured all over that living room and had to share beds and couches and sometimes the floor. But we were a family. We were a family. More. What if I told you during response time today that everyone who came forward would receive $10,000? Some of you that have been like hanging onto that chair with everything, you are now becoming a responder today. I can do it today. Yep, I'll go up and do whatever Pastor Ron wants me to do. What would you do with that? If that was and it's not true, it's not happening. Just saying. What would you do with it? I doubt you'd be stressing about it, honestly, saying, well, I don't know what I would do with it. I know what I would do with it. And I'm sure that immediately you all could say you would too. I have several bills that need paid. Some fixes that need fixed. But seriously, we would all do this. Or what if I said, come forward, you can have your dream home or a dream car. Some of you might even say, can I trade my husband in? No. You can't. We all have this inner desire to have more, and here's a big myth that we sometimes fall into. If I had more, I'd be happier. Now, I'll just say this right now, and I'll come back to this later. Depending on what you're talking about, that there might be some truth to that statement. But what if, I have what I have is good, but if I had bigger, better, faster life would be better and I would be happier. It's kind of like, this is kind of what I think sometimes, if I just had more, it would be better. And you've heard me tell the story about my red velvet cake that I get once a year. And it is amazing. It's fantastic. I know you say, it's just red velvet cake. You have not had this red velvet cake. You have not had it. It's just, and some of it is just part of a recipe that goes back in my family and all these superstitions, and you got to stir stuff over a red bowl and hold your mouth a certain way and breathe a certain amount. I'm serious. You guys think I'm just kidding, and I'm not. If you don't do it, it doesn't turn out. But what comes out is just this amazing, and sometimes it doesn't look very good. Seriously, sometimes it looks, it is so good. And I just love it. And I cut that first big piece and I lay it out and I eat it with my big glass of milk because that's how I have to eat my red velvet cake. And then and knowing, some of you could put whatever you want in this picture right now. It doesn't have to be red velvet cake. But you know that you want more. And in your mind, you're like, I've had enough. That was good. But I go back and get another one. And then I've done that again. There have been times that I've eaten probably half of that big cake in just a couple of hours. And it's great, man. Every bite is just awesome. And then about 30 minutes after you're done, you're like, why? Because it lasts for hours. Because there's so much like Crisco and all of this rich stuff that just is so awesome going down. It just gets stuck. And as awesome as more was, more didn't turn out to be better. Because sometimes you suffer through more. Financing that car for 20 years at 15% interest just because it's bigger or better. The house we can't afford, the credit cards, we max one out, we transfer them. It's so great, isn't it? People, they watch what we're doing. They know when our credit's about maxed out, and they send us that offer, right? They do. Transfer all your balance, 0% interest for a year, like we could pay it off in 10 years. But we transfer it, and we say, oh, I'm leaving that. I'm not never touching that card again, right? And then before long, both of them's maxed out. And then you get that next offer, 0%, and it's just a cycle. It's just a cycle. And it's so easy to get caught up in that cycle. Now, I'm in no way saying that stuff is bad. You guys know me. I love stuff. But when we allow our love for stuff to put us in a bad situation, then it's not good. And again, maybe some of you think that this message is about to head down a money trail, and I'm telling you it's not. Please stay with me. It's not. It will be a part of it, but this isn't about this. I'm not preaching this message to see offerings go up. I'm not preaching this message for this. I'm preaching this message because I believe that we all deserve the blessings of God. I believe that, every single one of us. And this is a part of life. I'm just being real. And all of us get to that place to think, if we just had more, life would be better. This morning I want to share 3 things with you really quick that in order to have more that we have to have. And the first one is this, a right focus. A right focus. I'm going to be in Luke chapter 12 today. Pretty much going to be going verse by verse in a particular story in this chapter. We're going to start in verse 13. I'm reading this out of the Message Bible today. I thought it spoke really real, just to be quite honest. Verse 13 says, someone out in the crowd said, Teacher, now this was someone that again, they were just speaking out to Jesus, Teacher, order my brother to give me a fair share of the family inheritance. Just reaches out, Jesus, tell my brother to give me my half. Back then when people died, and sometimes even today, their inheritance was passed down to their kids, with the larger percentage going to the firstborn son. Now the other sons, kids, whoever might get some of that, but the largest percentage, the largest part, and some would say the best of the inheritance went to the firstborn, kind of an 80-20, 70-30 kind of a thing. So this guy comes up to Jesus and says, Jesus, could you get my brother to split his inheritance with me? And see, this brother was like, I've got some stuff, but my brother has more stuff, and my brother has better stuff, and I want some of his stuff because my stuff's not enough. That's honestly what he was saying. And basically he was saying, Jesus, this isn't fair. This is not fair. Isn't that word fair? That's not fair. We hear that all the time. Fair is a place where you ride cheesy rides that make you puke. Seriously, what's fair? Because it's time we stop going to God and saying, God, you owe me. God, you owe me. I come to church every Sunday. God, you owe me. I give in the offering every week. God, you owe me. God, I serve every time there's an opportunity to serve. God, You owe me. I stand at the door and smile, God, you owe me and I want more. You know what God owes us? You know what God owes every single one of us, myself included today? Hell. Some of you went, that's what he owes us. Because we're all sinners. We all fall short. It's the whole reason Jesus came in the first place. That's what he owes me. That's what I deserve. But it's because of his grace and his mercy and his love that he gives us so much more than we deserve. And this guy in this story, a little greedy. Some of us have dealt with that. I've dealt with that. You drive by someone's house and it's bigger and nicer than ours, and sometimes we say, boy, they have a nice house. Because it's bigger and better than ours, we're like, they don't need that big house. They don't need that. Now, typically, if we drive by somebody's house who's smaller than ours, we don't say stuff like that. And then if somebody says something about our house being bigger than that person's house, oh, I worked hard for that. I put my time in for that. I've slaved to be able to get that. It's like perspective to what we think is a blessing, right? Happens. Sometimes we only criticize people whose houses are bigger than ours. Well, that can get pretty prideful and pretty dangerous. You know who else people, especially Christians, do this with? And I just want to say this really quickly, and I know you guys have heard me talk about things like this before, but why are Christians overly critical of big churches? And when I say big churches, like big mega churches, is sometimes we look at that and we criticize them and think, oh, all they're concerned about is money. All they want is more money. They have all these bells and whistles and frills and all of this stuff. They just want more money. And that's, for some reason, that's what we focus on, and we don't see behind the scenes, and maybe the millions of dollars they're investing in missions, or what they're doing to help this or to do that or invest this. And can I just say this? And I know this is going to sound really, really harsh, but it's really, really the truth. And it's just sometimes people said things in the Bible that were kind of shocking, to get people's attention. I'm just going to say it. There's smaller churches in this world that are doing a whole lot less with what they have. In fact, I know some that aren't doing anything. But yet they'll step back and they'll criticize some. Why? Because someone's bigger? There are churches smaller than this one. There are churches bigger than this one. But let me tell you something. If I can be as real with you, and this has been the real statement since day one, you keep the main thing, and that main thing is Jesus. And if we get our attitude and our focus and our heart off of anything else, then I promise you that this church will fall, and we will fall with it. I want this church to grow as large as it possibly can. I do. But more than that, I want people to grow as much as it possibly can in their relationship with Christ. Sometimes everything's not what we see. Don't be critical of something just because it's bigger than or smaller than. All right, soapbox over. Well, not yet. Remember the story in the Bible? I just read that, and it made me think of this. Remember the story in the Bible where the leader was going away on a trip, and he gave some of his talents away? To some he gave 10, to some he gave 1, he gave 5, and then one he gave 1. It's not how much stuff you have, it's what you do with the stuff that you have. Because the two that had more than the third, yeah, they had more, but they worked at it, they invested with it, they doubled it. And the one who had 1 didn't think that was enough, so they didn't do anything. And you remember the response from, boy, it was harsh, wasn't it? Get that man out of my sight, throw him out to the dogs. Okay, now I'm done. Verse 14. He replied, Mister, this is Jesus' response to this man. Remember the man said, hey, this isn't fair, give me half my brother's stuff. Jesus said, Mister, what makes you think it's any of my business to be a judge or a mediator for you? And you can just really read in this the frustration of Jesus in this, because this guy, instead of focusing on the good things that he had or being thankful, he was more focused on what he didn't have. Because his pile wasn't as big as his brother's pile, and it aggravated this person. And Jesus was, in this response, you just kind of hear this, hey, man, be thankful. Be thankful for what you have because you're blessed. And we get sucked into the same way of thinking. If I just had that stuff, their stuff, more stuff, better stuff, then life would be better. It starts with kids. If I had the newest game console, the newest Xbox, the newest PlayStation, if I just had that, if I just had the new iPhone, if I just had the new Samsung, if I just had the new computer, then I would be cool like that person. Man, if I just had that Camaro, Dad, instead of a little gray two-door Chevette. I drove that Chevette as much as they'd let me drive it. Sometimes we think more is better. Forget the fact that we are blessed and have something to drive. Now listen, I'd love to have a nicer truck than what I have in my driveway, but you know what my truck does? It moves, it runs, it pulls my boat, it can haul some trash away, it can get me from point A to point B, it can be available for my kids when they're moving stuff in their house, and it works, and I'm blessed, and I'm thankful. Amen. Would I like to have a new one? Yes, I would. Do I want the payment? No, I don't. Verse 15, speaking to the people, he went on. Jesus said, take care, exclamation point. Anytime you see an exclamation point in the Bible when you're reading, it means take notice, step up. This is important. Take care. Protect yourself against the least bit, the smallest amount of greed. Life is not defined by what you have, even when you have a lot. Love that statement. Life is not defined by what you have, even when you have a lot. That's good. That's good. Jesus said this with passion. He said, this is an attitude. That's what he's saying. He said, this is an attitude that more is better. And Jesus said, the more you have doesn't necessarily make it better. Jesus said, life is not defined by what you have. More stuff will not make us happier. I got to have it. It's like the infomercial mentality. Knives that never go dull. Remember that stuff in the can you could spray and they used a long time, infomercials come on at night, right? And sometimes when you're bug-eyed and insomnia, you can't sleep and you'll watch the dumbest things at night, won't you? I remember watching the thing. You remember you sprayed it on and they used a screen door. And they sprayed that stuff on the screen and it would float. You remember that, Tate? Tate's over going, I've watched that. I've been up at 3 o'clock in the morning before. And we buy it because it looks cool. What about the garden hose? You remember the garden hose? It kind of folded up into this little thing, and it was just really, really small, and then you would turn it on, and it would go whoosh. And then when you took all the water out, it just kind of curled up. That was awesome. Now, I didn't buy one, but I thought about it. Seriously, it's just like we see, I got to have that, I got to have that, I got to have that, and I got to have that. We see this cool stuff. Jesus said it's not about more. All right, the second thing today, to have more, remember the first, we had the right focus. Second thing, we have to have the right perspective. Verse 16. Then Jesus told them the story. The farm of a certain rich man, produced a terrific crop. Now just think about this. We've been blessed with a good crop, but who is honestly responsible for that? God is. I just want to say that as plain. God is responsible for that. God admits, well, I worked hard. Yeah, we put our work in, and God expects us to work hard. Please don't misinterpret what I'm saying. He expects us to work hard and be good stewards of what He has given us, but He first gave us the farm, okay? He's responsible for that. God owns it all. The dirt, the seed, the water, the crop, it came from God. We're just stewards. Then some people think, well, God just wants my money. Seriously, God doesn't want your money. If He wanted your money, He would take your money. I mean, He would, wouldn't He? If He wanted, He'd take it. We're blessed. Someone says, I'm not blessed. Really? I would ask just a few simple questions. And just asking, do you have air conditioning? Do you have air conditioning in your car? Do you have a car? Do you have indoor plumbing? Do you have food? Man, we're so spoiled. Americans are so spoiled. Did you know that we're one of the few cultures on the planet that uses the word leftovers? And think about that. And come on, guys, I'm guilty. I got leftovers in my refrigerator right now. How many of us have put leftovers in a Tupperware and put it in the refrigerator, and then 3 weeks later you got to throw the Tupperware away? But that's the truth. Some of you have heard me tell the story of the two little kids, my very first trip to Nicaragua. Vernon's smiling, he was on that trip. We were in this outdoor little restaurant, they call it a fritanga. They give us this whole big chicken, it was fantastic. Rice and beans, plantains fried up like French fries, bananas with ketchup. It was pretty good. Especially when you hadn't had a potato in about 8 days. And here we are, this team of, 25 or 30 people. No silverware, just picture it, man. We are just like, it was fantastic. And then all of a sudden we're all sitting there and we're just kind of sitting there at these tables. We're talking and joking and having fun and talking about. And then all of a sudden, here comes these two little flashes, right through the middle of us, grabbing as many plates as they can grab. These two little boys. One was about 10 or 11, one was probably 6 or 7. And the owners of the cafe were screaming at them in Spanish. There's no telling really what they were saying, but you knew they were getting on them. And they ran down to the end of the sidewalk. I will never, as long as I live, ever forget it. And they were kneeled down over these plates of chicken bones. And they were eating those chicken bones. I'm not talking trying to just peel the meat off what was left. I'm talking about crunching them like a cookie. And I remember my pastor getting up. And I remember him stopping. Because they were going to get him in trouble. They were trying to call for police. And Pastor Gary said, no, don't be doing that. And so not only we gave them bags. If we had a bag or if they had a bag, they loaded everything up in those bags. Anything else that they had there that was cooked, I think we bought it and gave it to them and sent them on their way. I've held babies. I've held little kids that were so malnourished. Their hair was changing colors and their skin changed colors. We are blessed. We're blessed. Maybe I just say that today to remind you and to remind myself. Because I eat well. I have a nice home. I've had a terrific crop. Verse 17. He talked to himself, what can I do? This was this man again. Remember, he was the rich man. He said, what can I do? My barn isn't big enough for this harvest. My. Back then it was expected, God first, then family and others, and then maybe somewhere down the road, me. If you had a good crop, you gave the first of it to God. That's what was expected. That's what God said in his word. But this guy was focused on himself. He had a good crop, but he was blessed, but it wasn't God first. Verse 18. Then he said, here's what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and I'll build bigger ones. I want a bigger barn. This guy already had big barns, but he wanted bigger barns. And you know what this does for us sometimes? There's nothing wrong with having big barns and cool stuff. But sometimes we look at people with big barns and think, well, if I could just be like them, they have it all. And if I could just have more, then that would make me happier. I'll just build a bigger barn. Worship team, if you would like to come up, that would be fantastic. Because here we go in for the landing. Verse 19, then I'll gather in all my grain and goods, and I'll say to myself, self, you have done well. I like that. You got it made. Now you can retire, take it easy, and have the time of your life. Bigger stuff, better stuff, makes me happier. But then in verse 20, just then God showed up and said, fool. Well, this is harsh. He said, fool, exclamation point. Tonight you die. And your barn full of goods, who gets it? Who gets it? There are very few instances in the Bible where someone does something so bad that God takes their life from them immediately. If you go to Acts chapter 5, and I would challenge you, make that a part of your reading this week, you'll read the story of Ananias and Sapphira and how what started out to be a journey of trying to do something really amazing turned into a journey of greed and selfishness. And God struck them down because of greed and selfishness. You know, there are two views really today of money in the church. Both of them are wrong. One of them is called the prosperity theology. If you just give and have faith, then life will be great. That's not true. Just because you give doesn't mean life's going to be perfect. Doesn't mean the dog won't use the bathroom in the house and your steak gets cooked perfect every time. Your kids will always be respectful and you'll always be happy. There's also the poverty theology that rich people are ungodly and poor people are godly. And that's completely the farthest thing from the truth. It's not a sin to have money. In fact, I would say one of the most powerful things on the planet is a Christian who has money, and a lot of it, and not afraid to give it away. It's not afraid to give it away. Third thing, to have more, we have to have the right heart. We have to have the right heart. You have to have the right focus, the right perspective, and the right heart. You know why selfishness and greed offends God so much? Because He's as generous as they come. He's a generous God. He's a giver. You know, I want you to grow in your walk with God, so sometimes we preach tough messages. And please always know, if it's tough coming from here, it's tough right here as well. Most of you that know me know who I am, and I preach where I'm at, and I preach my struggles, and that's just, you may agree sometimes with the tough messages, and you may not. I'm not necessarily preaching to please you. I preach to tell you the truth, is what I feel like God has spoken. So please hear this when I say this, and I say this out of love. I do not believe I can sit here for 1 second and say that God is number one in my life and it not affect my wallet. I do not believe that I can stand here and say that God is number one in my life and it not affect my barn. And please don't misinterpret. I'm not saying anything bad about stuff. We can all agree, right? I love stuff. I can close my eyes right now and I can picture new stuff that I'd like to have right now. But God has to be more important than that stuff. He has to be. The Bible talks about what is ever in the center of your heart. What's ever in the center of your heart, that's where your treasure, that's what you're focused on. That's what's important to you. And you know why that is? Because that center spot is originally designed for God and God alone. And so if He's in His rightful place in our life, then that's our treasure, and there is no greater one. But when we move Him to the side or up or down or below or wherever it is, if we take Him out of that spot, then that treasure can become anything. It can become money. It can become possessions. It can become your house, it can become your car. It can become a hobby. It can even become work. And then the stuff in the barn becomes more important than the one who gave you the need to build the barn in the first place. God is generous. And we say we strive to be more like God in all areas of our lives, so why is it so hard in this area to honor God first with what we have? Sometimes we spend more time giving God leftovers than the best that we have. But He gave us the best in His Son. I'll finish with verse 21. And the story ends by simply saying that's what happens when you fill your barn with self and not with God. This is what happens when you fill your barn with self and not with God. Jesus did not say, this is how it will be for people who store up things for themselves. That's not what He said. He said, this is what happens when it's more about you than it is about God. It wasn't about the stuff in the barn to begin with. It was about attitude. It was about heart. It was about focus, perspective. That's what it was about. It's not wrong to have stuff. It's wrong to let the stuff be more important than God. And I want to finish with sharing this. To have more, God has to be more than anything in your life. To have more, God has to be more than anything in your life, no matter what it is. And when He is more than anything else, you love more, you forgive more, you invest more, you give more, you serve more, you grow more, your marriage is more, your family is more. And that more is not based on how much stuff is in your barn. More is based on the one who gave you the ability to build the barn in the first place.